Hey, what's up, guys? It's Ricky Jr., of course, with Fine Ink Academy. And today I'm going to do a little demo on some neo-traditional tattooing. So we'll stop and talk about some techniques. Most of these techniques you guys will know, but we're going to include them in this video so you can kind of see in real time how I'm using them and in what order I use them in. When you're tattooing neo-traditional, it's really the same thing as tattooing traditional, but you just have a broader range of tools you can use in terms of like color and line weight. So maybe you can get into 2 or 3 line weights, maybe some thinner ones, as well as expanding your color palette to be a little bit more fun. But generally, the base of the style is the same. So we're going to hop into that now. Not going to be much talking on this video, but we will stop at a couple points and show you some specific techniques that'll help you guys. So notice right here, I'm making sure that I don't accept that those lines don't connect. I want to make sure they have a nice clean connection right there. I'm always making sure as I see problems that I fix them as I go through. I'm not going to let them go and then fix them later. I'll do it once through later, but if I see it, I'm just going to get rid of it right then. Making sure all my lines connect, and that I taper in and taper out of everything. I have a thinner line weight I'm going to go through and do these lines with, so I'm just going to get the large lines in all this area done, and then I'll go back and do those thinner ones. I'm probably going to move from this area to down right here, so that I can kind of get this done, and then I'll move right up to these legs, because I want to make sure that as I'm setting my hand for these legs, I'm not setting on my stencil. And Vaseline down on everything, every time. and I'm making sure that I stop regularly and wipe off all the excess ink. You see how there's not ink all over my thing and I'm tattooing? I'm trying to keep it super, super clean so I can see what I'm doing. So now that this is done, I'm going to move back up this way and work this way again. Now for this area, there's stencil all around it. I'm going to take a clean spot. I'm going to dab it up. You see? I didn't wipe first. I dabbed to get all that excess ink up. And then when I wipe, I'm wiping into something I've already tattooed. Bam. If you see excess ink on that needle, make sure you get it out. You can lightly touch just like that and it'll draw that ink out. You don't want big drips as you set it down. That'll smear everywhere. And you'll notice it's a lot more common with these larger liners that they do that. Alright guys, so I'm going to slow down some of the talking and get this line work done so we can hop into some shading and coloring techniques, alright? Again, fixing those issues right when I see them. I'm not going to wait till later. That was a little disconnect. These little things is what adds up to the good quality over time, guys. Again, this little drip here, get that thing gone, dude. You don't want that smearing all over your tattoo. So now it's easy for you guys to see. It's like this diagonal movement. Like I was here, and then I was here, and then I was up here, and then I'm down here. I kind of am swinging back and forth all the way up this design so that I'm always making sure that when I'm up here, whatever's down here, I can set on. So we're going to continue to now go up this way. I am going to take a small break, and I'm going to switch to my smaller needle so I can get like this leg here and these like smaller little lines throughout here. It looks like there was a leg that was drawn in right here, but I don't necessarily see where it connects. So I'm gonna make the executive decision right now that I'm gonna leave that one out. I think it'll be a better tattoo if I do that. So now here we are with the smaller 7-round liner. All those small little lines. Got some more right here. Now I'm going to switch back to my 14 round liner and get all these things up here. Or 11 liner, that is, sorry. And now, I'm going to swing back up. I'm going to get this flower and get this done. 7A7.
I accidentally deleted it because it was there, and like for whatever reason it hovered over like the X. I fuck. So I gotta add it again. I'll
Gotcha.
text it to you real quick. Yeah, text it to me.
I'm in this weird position where, like, my body is telling me to continue all the thick lines, but some of these thin lines are really starting to fade. So I'm gonna go back and switch to my 7 and get those thin lines before they fall out. And I'll probably throw in these lines too while I'm here. Not accepting any little flaw or problem. I'm going back and fixing every little thing. You know, good tattoo artists don't do one pass lines every time. They fix every line every time there's something wrong. So you'll see there's kind of like a little wobble right here. Like, I don't like that, so I'm gonna just go lightly over it, back and forth. Real lightly. We've already tattooed over this area, so you don't want to cut them up, but I just made it like just a touch thicker to avoid that little wiggle, to get rid of it. Then back to my 11, finishing up these thick lines. I'm gonna switch back out to my 7 and get these thinner lines done.
Now we're going to go back to this 11. Get this whole body area done, and then I'll probably go back in with the 7 and do all the thin lines. Now, again, there's ink all throughout here, and I wasn't super great with my petroleum jelly. You see there's jelly up here, but not over here. How do we fix that? Well, put your machine down, put it in your good hand, and dab that up. Just take that little bit of extra time to clean that up. I'm telling you. And again, we'll switch to this 7. Making sure that these pieces really connect in with this line. So I'm starting on this edge, following it. I'm not tattooing, but I'm following just above it, and I taper in right as it needs to connect. Now we'll switch back to our thicker liner. We can finish this area, go back in and do the thin lines, and then it's just the tail and we're done. Again, I see this line being a little bit light here. I'm going to go back in and fix it right now. Again, I see the line a little bit light right here. I've done this like, what is it, 10 times now, guys? It's normal that that happens. It's just a lot of people don't go back and fix it. Like, go back and fix it right when you see it. And always try to be looking for these areas. I feel like I'm saying the same thing over and over again, but really, quality is just diligence. These are simple techniques. You know how to do them. It's being disciplined to repeat the same exact process over and over again. Consistency. Doing it the same way you did it yesterday. All right. So now I'm going to go back through with my 7, get all these small lines. Again, you'll see like there's a little wiggle. You see that little wiggle right there? I'm going to go through, back and forth, right on that edge. You just make it a touch thicker and get rid of that. All right, now it's large lines up here, so we'll switch back to the 11. All right, guys, again, made a mistake. No Vaseline in this area. Ink is all pulled up right on the end of this little stinger here. Remember, take a clean part, a part that's nice and clean, and I'm going to dab before I wipe. Clean that up before you keep going. right, now we just got a couple smaller lines to get through and then it's all done. All right, so now that I'm nice and done with this line work, I'm gonna take a good amount of Vaseline and I'm kind of gonna put it over everything. And I'm gonna do circles over this entire design. I'm trying to get up all that ink. On a client, you'd probably just spray down some green soap, but that slides around all over this stuff and it doesn't work as well. So we're gonna do this. And then I just take a clean side and I just kind of wipe all down in one direction. You'll see it kind of picks up all that excess ink there, so that when we start on the shading, everything is nice and clean, and it's just like we started with the stencil. We're about to start our shading, but what I like to do every time that I transition from my line work to my shading is I take a small break, and then I come back and I really just try to look at my line work and see if there's anything that is not acceptable to me quality-wise and things that I should fix. Now, two really stick out to me. The first one is we have a little misconnect right here. The line doesn't touch completely. I actually missed a small line because my stencil wiped away. There's supposed to be a line kind of connecting these two shapes. And then I think it's this line right here is just a little bit light. So I'm going to go back through and fix all those little things real quick before we start our shading. And I've said this a couple times already, but really what's separating a really good tattooer and really good neo-traditional work is an artist that isn't the best artist or the best technical, but the one that's the most diligent. So right now, I could totally just do the shading, and it would probably be completely fine. I don't think anybody would really notice it. The client's probably not going to notice it, but I do, so I'm going to fix it. And you know, throughout your career, the less hungry you get, the less you might want to fix these things, but just make it a habit now. Make it to where you just do this so much and you're so used to going back and fixing your stuff that it's just routine. And you know, these styles, neo-traditional and traditional, and even like Japanese traditional and minimalism, like, you know, obviously the drawing matters, but the technique and being super clean can ruin, or not being clean, sorry, can ruin a great tattoo. That's a great design. So if you're putting all your effort into your design, you have a great design, you know, make sure that when you tattoo it, you know, you don't have to have one pass lines every time. That's not what being a good tattooer is about. A good tattooer, just, you know, they don't accept that this didn't connect right here. I'm fixing the line work, you know, I'm not accepting that this line right here is a little bit too light. I can see it and I'm gonna fix it. Now, as you go over these lines that you've already tattooed, make sure you're not going as hard as you did the first pass, because you'll start cutting them, right? So anytime you're going back over these lines, you know, kind of almost dust it in. You know, you want to try to keep your hand movement consistent, but you've already dropped the line and it's already straight. It just needs to get filled in a little bit. So almost think in more of the mindset of that you're filling it in. So like we'll see there's a little bit of lightness right here. So I'm just going to go through and I kind of go back and forth and go into my line, you know, like just work into it and make sure that that gets all filled back in. So now I'm pretty happy with my line work. I've scanned it a couple times. There's nothing that I'm super upset about. So I think I'm ready to move on. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this 11 liner, right? I'm going to clear the ink out of it as much as I can, just in case anything dried up while we took our break. So I rinsed it out in my water real quick. I'll get all that water out. Now I'm going to dip into my black ink and then a couple times into my water. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to recognize that this is a lining tool. There's round shaders, there's round liners. Round shaders have hollow centers, so there's no needles that are in the middle of the grouping. I'm sure we can fly in a graphic to show you guys that. So I'm going to use this as if it was a round shader. They're really the same exact thing, guys. Like round shaders, yeah, you can get a little bit smoother and you'll probably do a little bit less damage to the skin. But if you know what you're doing and you have a good touch and you're using good hand pressure, you can use this tool and it's completely fine. So this is what I'm going to use to get all the black shading in all these smaller parts and then the smaller legs. So we'll go through and do that right now. If you know the circles to whip out technique that we've talked about, you'll see me using that on pretty much all of these. And even on some of the smaller parts, it'll just be whip outs. So like down here, they're just whip outs. And I'm keeping a consistent hand pressure and blending straight up, and you see we have a nice clean blend. With a lining needle, oh my God, it's a lining needle. You could do that. And I'm just gonna go over all these small shapes and whip up and out. You can see, you start getting some nice shading down there. Now I'm gonna hit this again, and I want my shading to get kind of dark, so I'm gonna do some circles, and I'm gonna kind of hatch up. You see how I kind of extended that black there? That's what I'm looking to do. I wanna make sure that, this is a black scorpion, so I need to leave skin breaks, but it's gotta get dark enough to show that it's not like, white scorpion with dark shadowing on it, right? It's gotta be black. We're gonna add a little skin tone between the black and the skin just to get a nice clean blend off. But generally it's just kind of going to be this black. You see I'm making sure I'm working right up to the line every time. And anytime there's a little spot that isn't right, that isn't consistent, I go back with a light pressure and I fill that spot in. Same thing that I did for the lines. You can see it's all that whip out technique the whole way through. Now we don't have any stencils, so you'll see my wiping's a lot more liberal now. I'm a little bit less worried about it. So you'll see a little bit more ink on it now, but anytime it gets too crazy. Now, right there, that's a great technique. So kind of this hatching, you'll start with little small circles and then hatch out and just kind of pull up the pressure. Same thing that you do with that pendulum. It's just the back end of that. You get a nice clean blend like that. I'm always making sure when I dip that I dip back in that water so I can keep it diluted right at the same amount. Start on some of these legs. And, for this tattoo, I'm worried about light source. In my head, it's kind of coming from this top left side, so everything is getting shaded this direction. But, for this style, the light just needs to be somewhat consistent. We're not doing realism, but we're trying to make sure that every shape, that I'm not covering it up with too much black. Like this would be super easy to just fill in black and let it go away. I made sure to leave a small space up at that top so that it can breathe. And over time, it doesn't just close up and become nothing as it heals. Same thing with these spots. I'm gonna put black up against this edge, so there needs to be lightness between this line and this edge, or it's just all gonna be one. So I make sure my whips are real small, and I'm being very controlled, making sure that I don't go too high. You see how we have that gap? We're trying to keep that. Same thing with this little spot right here. I want to make sure that I keep all those lines that I did. This isn't a style where you're trying to get rid of your line work. You know, maybe if it was realism, I'm trying to blend those away, but this style is really about those bold lines and having everything simply described and slightly exaggerated with color, simplified a bit. So now, same thing on that leg, whipping out. Same thing on this one, using kind of that whip out motion. You'll see I'm you know, following the edge. Same thing here, same as, you know, right here to right here. I have to shade this dark, but I can't get, if I cover this shape, it'll just be all one. Making sure to leave that. Readability, super important for neo-traditional and traditional styles, and other things like Japanese. Now this, probably just gonna fill this all in right here. That'll make the most iconic shape I can right there. It has a nice separation, and this leg is behind this flower, so it being darker makes more sense, and it helps the eye know that something went behind. It's giving context to that, where sometimes line work doesn't fully paint that picture. Especially if they're the same line weight. Like I used thick line on this and on this, so maybe if I use that 7 liner on that, but then we're getting out of the style, you know, it's starting to be too realistic. So I'll just use a little bit of value and put that behind it. And, you know, we'll do the same thing over here. So the first thing I'm gonna do is put this body behind this petal. So I'll take that whipping motion and we'll just assume that there's supposed to be a shadow. And I'll whip this way first. So now that it's under that, now I know what I have to do with my value to make sure that I don't get rid of this line. This has to get dark, and then it has to fade up to right there because I'm trying to make sure everything doesn't disappear. If I did all this first and then blended in, I could have accidentally covered that little spot. But I knew that that could happen, so I'm setting myself up to be successful. Same thing with this shape. I'm gonna blend this way, but you know, we have to see that lightness. We'll shade up from here. Bam. Kind of all those smaller shapes in there. I'll go to these legs over here. Get all these smaller shapes put in. Now again, small circles and then hatching, this little pendulum movement also. I'm blending all these techniques together so that as I'm moving around in different positions, you know, I have the right medicine for every single thing. Same right here. I'm not thinking too much about this shading, man. I'm just making sure that, you know, when I put my pink behind here, we can see the leg and we can see the darkness of the leg. Just enough so that people know that this is a black scorpion. That's what we're trying to depict. We're always keeping what we're trying to show them in mind. Don't get too concerned about the leg or the flower or the petal or the whatever. Remember, what we're trying to do is show them a black scorpion. Now we got some smaller spots right here and then right here. So we'll get those done. Make sure we, so like right there, I could let that go. I'm gonna be picky, fill that all the way in. Some people will let that go. Younger artists will let that go. We won't. Now, I'm thinking in my head, should I move up to my bigger grouping at this point? And I think that's what I'm gonna do now. I'm gonna move up to my 15 curve mag. I might pull out this liner again to do the shading off of the back, but I'll shade this way first, and then I'll see, you know, if I have to shade that up direction. We'll see. I'll do what I know I have to do first, and then we'll go back in and add some finishing touches afterwards. So this is that nice 15 curve mag. Now, what I see in my head is that these areas have really nice black whips, and then I kind of want to, I'm debating whether I want to put a skin tone on the edge of this or not. I feel like it would definitely make it look like kind of more of a reddish color instead of a black scorpion. So, you know, as I'm continuing to do this, thinking of the color harmony between the pinks and that color, I think it draws it all the way around, but I'm just going to get in all my black first and kind of see what it is, because I also don't want to muddy up the design. Like, there still has to be skin breaks, and in a lot of these smaller areas, there's not really room to put another blend. So, you know, I'm going to make sure that I'm being diligent. I'm shifting my direction if I'm seeing something's not going to work. You know, once you're committed to something, you don't have to continue to make that mistake if you realize. And again, I'm hitting that water and making sure I put petroleum jelly down. And guys, it's no coincidence I'm starting with the black. You always start with the black, you always start with your darker colors, and you work them up. You see that nice pendulum movement I'm doing? I'm kind of laying down that blend. Then I'm going to wipe and make sure I'm satisfied with the way that blends to that skin. Now I'm going to go back behind and I'm going to do my small circles to whip out. Small circles to whip out. And make sure I get the value I need. Just like that. Now I'll go back behind here and do the same thing. Small circles, whip out. And you can see I'm kind of using just the corner of this rounded mag in these small areas. And I'm still using that hatching motion. You know, it's just flat now. You get a pretty nice smooth blend now. So I'll move on. I'll go over here and do this same one. Now this one, it's a little bit of a smaller shape, so I'm just going to start with my circles. Start with my small circles and whip out off of it. I've also now used this mag a little bit, and I'm confident with the product it's going to give me, so I can open up a little bit and move a little quicker. Now, we can see there's a little light spot right here. I'm not going to accept it. Make sure everything is completely saturated and blended smoothly. Just like that. That's starting to look good to me. So now we'll move on to these shapes right here and then up here. I'm definitely going to have to use a smaller liner to get these. I will do the shading this way, but already with the size of this mag in these areas, I can tell I'm moving around a lot to get it to fit. So I know that, these shapes will be really hard for me that way. So just kind of keeping that in the back of my mind. Always creating a plan of attack. Same thing here. I'm gonna do some small circles and whip out. Now you'll see these motions are much smaller, but you get the same product. Same thing here. Start with some small circles and then blend off of it, lightening up my pressure. You can hear it lighten up. Right here, small circles, whip out. Small circles, whip out. Now the alternative of doing this together is to do it in two separate spots. Fill the black you want to do and then whip out. But if you can start practicing this motion where you're doing it together and then flattening out that mag, it's super quick and efficient, and you can get a lot done super quick. Now, again, I talked a lot about with the lining, going back and fixing things you don't like right then. I'm thinking that this is too light. So I'm going to come back in, and I don't want to damage the skin, so I'm not doing any circles anymore, but I'm doing my pendulum motion just to darken that up a little bit. I feel a lot better with that now. So now I'm going to move up to the head of the scorpion, and I'm just going to use whip outs on this, because this one's really important to me that we get a nice shadow, because I feel like this is the focal point. So I'm going to make sure that it whips out really nice, and then I'm going to fill in that black. You'll notice it's kind of the same thing I did with this larger shape. I'll lay down and make sure the blend is good, and I'm not using up all the skin doing that, so that I can come back and fill in that black and make sure it's as dark as I want it. But I know for sure that I got the blend I needed. Now, you're starting to see there's lots of ink on this in all these areas. I'm just going to try to keep it as clean as I can, and I'm going to switch up my paper towel. And then again, I'm going to do that same thing that we did after we did the line work. I'm just going to drop some of this Vaseline down and make sure that we don't get too far out of the way with it being unclean. Like I said, on a client, you might use green soap. You would use green soap or water, but for this application, this is probably the best. So now this shape's a little smaller again, so I'm making sure I'm using smaller pendulum motions, and then I'll go back and fill that black in. You can see you get a nice rounded top to that. From here, I've got to give it an edge. So I know that I can shade all these together, so we're just going to go ahead and do that now. Now remember, when I start these bigger shapes, I like to kind of break open all that skin and get that blend nice and tight first. Let's make sure we got that. Okay, maybe not enough blend, it's not dark enough yet. So I'll make sure I go back in, I'm hitting my water. And we're getting a nice, clean blend of that skin. All right, I'm pretty happy with that now. So now I'll go back, small circles, and whip out. I'm going to do that on each of these segments here. And go back over everything, because I want to make sure that everything's all blended together. So I'm using that pendulum motion very, very, very light, just barely touching. trying to blend everything all together if there were any spots that weren't all together. And bam, I'm pretty happy with that. And you know I said I'd go back here with the liner, but I really feel like it's just these bottom couple ones over here. Like if we could just drag this shadow shape out that way, and we probably won't have to do it but to this point right here, just because the way the light would be from that direction. It makes sense now that there's nothing going, that way. So we'll make sure that, this shadow doesn't draw out too far, that it stops kind of right where this one does, so that everything is all together, and it's kind of one, almost like little modified egg shape. And I'm pretty happy with how that looks. I don't think I really need much more, and I feel like you know what it looks like, and the client's going to know what it looks like, so I think that that's the right move. Now, I'm seeing this little shape right here that I don't like, so make sure I get rid of it. Make sure I blend everything together. As I make something else darker, it's going to make everything else look lighter, so I kind of go back and make sure that everything's all in line. And I'm seeing now that this part has to be darker here. You see how I'm not married to one plan. I'm always like thinking about what I can do to make this thing better throughout the entire process of tattooing. And like I've said it already a ton of times today, but it's really just being diligent. These techniques are super simple, but it's how you approach them that's going to make you good or bad. And it's what's going to make your tattoo look good or bad. Again, if I get a little bit too much ink, I'm trying to get all that off. I want to be able to see as well as I can. See me kind of just using the corner right there on that smaller shape. Same thing here, I'm making sure I leave a nice skin break. You see how often I'll shade in a couple different directions just to make sure I'm covering all my bases. Alright, so that's just about it on all the black. I'm kind of going to look another once through again and see if there's anything that I'd like to do. And I think that's it for all the black. And I don't think I'm going to go back in and do that skin tone. I just think it'd look a little bit weird. I think it blends super nice and it reads super well. So I'm going to stop right there. Now what I've got to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to do all the green because that's the next darkest color. Then I'll get the pink in these flowers and then the yellow in the centers. So I'm going to start at the tops of these. Actually, these are pink. These are all the, there's only 5 leaves. they look super similar, but you can see the leaves are a little smaller. See, so almost made a mistake. It's kind of just always keeping the context of everything in my head. And for this, I'm really going to focus on that whip out technique. And I'll wipe, and I'll see what we got. Yeah, nice, sweet. So, seems like I still had some black in my needle. I can tell just because it's a little bit dark, and you can kind of see the value isn't as bright as I want it. So I'm gonna make sure I rinse out again. And now that there was green in my needle, when I blend out or when I rinse it out, it's gonna be a lot better. Do some small circles and push out. Some small circles and push out. There we go, that's better. Now I'll just kind of go through all these and do the same thing. I'll change up my paper towel so I'm not wiping black around anymore. Like I said, for these short petals, I usually like this, just this whip out motion. It works super well on these traditional flowers. And then I'll kind of go back and fill in, you know, with the corner of my mag, whatever needs to be. But you have a nice blend there. And, you know, something to note, guys, is this this color is going in exactly how this black is. There's no difference between color and black. You know, a lot of the times there's just white mixed into the pigment, so it can make it look redder, and it can also be stickier on the skin. So that's why I stress always being super clean, because then as you're using color, you know, those disadvantages of using colors that are mixed with white, they're less apparent for you because you're keeping everything really, really clean. And you're also being patient enough to wait and see that redness go away so you can gauge what level of saturation you're at. A lot of the times, you know, when people are using these colors like this, they'll see redness start to show through, and they think that, you know, those parts that are showing redness are darker, which means the parts that aren't are too light, and then they start going over those parts that are too light, and they start to eat up the skin. Like, you know, the blood that shows through isn't always going to be completely 100% consistent. Sometimes it'll be really splotchy, and that splotchiness makes you think that there's different values or different saturation levels of your ink, and it's really not. It's just the redness. Put some green soap on it, put some Bactine on it, and give it 10-15 minutes, and then come back and really assess whether it's redness or if there's parts of it that are not saturated properly. So now right here, I gotta make sure I fill this green in. I missed that spot. And I want this blend to be a little longer also. Now that I've done a bunch of stuff right there, that blend isn't clean. So now I'll just kind of, with a real light hand, go over everything and try to blend that out. And yeah, much happier with that. So we move on to this last green leaf. And I did plan for a second green going right there, but again, it's just starting to seem like there's not enough space to do that. And like filling it wall to wall over time probably won't be best on this smaller tattoo. So I'm definitely gonna give the skin space to breathe. Now, this is a little bit of a weird angle for me, so I'm changing the angle of my body to be able to get this. You know, a lot of the times on this practice skin, you guys will pick it up and like turn it around, well, you can't necessarily do that with your client. So really get used to moving your body around. I know we've told you that before, but in situations like this, it's super, super important that you stay disciplined in practicing this craft, you know, really like you're tattooing a person, practicing how you'll perform, you know, like you'll see my hand is always up where I'm tattooing. I don't have to stretch this, you know, but I'm keeping my hand in that spot because that's my habit, you know, and it should be yours too, or you'll be pretty upset when you're trying to tattoo one-handed. And, you know, I'm building it up slowly. Fixing any little error as I see it. Trying to make sure it's just all consistent. And I like how that's looking, so I think we're gonna move on to this pink color now. So again, dip in some water, shake my machine around a bit, and then try to get all that grain out. Now this green is the complementary color to this pink. So if there's any green in my needle, it's really gonna darken up that pink. Really, really, really darken it up. It's gonna take all the color out. So I need to really, really clean this out. And I need to be more diligent than I was when I did the black. Because this pink is gonna be the biggest pop on this tattoo. So it's gotta be super, super, super crisp and clean. So yeah, you can see now it's nice and dry. There's no green in there, no black in there. That's what we're trying to look for. All right. So now it's the exact same thing, different color. Again, weird angles. I'm making sure I change my technique. So now I'm using almost more of like a hatching in this area because it's very weird for me to go back and forth like this or move the machine and go that way. So because I can't move, I would either, you know, come all the way out here, or I can just stay where I'm at and do some pendulum shading the opposite direction, but make sure I'm getting lighter as I go up. Now we've got some some little spots behind here that would be kind of blent out. I'm gonna make sure that I fill them in 100% because I want them to see that pink behind there, behind the leg. I think it's super important. So I'll make sure I get that completely filled in. Same thing with this one right here. And I'm just using the corner of this rounded mag. Now, that's a lot sharper than using it flat, so I'm not going as hard as I was. And then I'm thinking the same thing for this shape. I should fill this all in too. So I'm doing this, and then when I'm blending up from this bottom, I turn, and I'm going to use the other side of the corner. You can fill it all in. You see how the approach was different? You know, if I was doing it consistently how I did this, this would be light. There should be a skin break there. But having a random light shape between the leg, this, and here, it'll look unfinished. So I'm making sure that I fill that in, and I'm trying to be conscious of you know, what a viewer would see if they seen something like that. And then all for the rest of the petals, I can do my regular, you know, blend out. Right there, you just gotta make sure, you know, that's a tight blend, so be careful there, but yeah, now you get that blend that's all the way through the bottom of that. And, you know, tattooing is all about the order of operations. It's really less about being a great artist. If you're a great artist, your tattoos will look better, but to do good tattoos, that's a technical skill. You know, you have to know the order in which to do things and, you know, what's right and what's wrong, and that's what makes you a good tattooer. Now, whether you're a tattoo artist or not, well, that's up to the art that you do outside of tattooing and how well it translates when you add in all the other factors of, you know, how hard it is to even tattoo. Again, on this side, I did that same thing. It's a weird angle that's kind of lateral, and you'll notice it's a lot of these lateral angles that I switched to some circles and some hatching with the corner. It just makes it so much easier. And honing in all these different techniques will help you out if you go into something like realism. And right here, I just feel more comfortable with a nice whip out. Like I'm just doing what I feel is comfortable, but I'm blending all these techniques that we've taught you guys. We're blending them together so that I can do this as efficient as possible. If you only had one tool and you only had whip out, I mean, dude, you'd be moving all around this thing, and you know, it'd just be so slow of a process. You got to learn all these techniques, start blending them all together. And like learning where your mag fits. Like these little corners, you know, I wouldn't do flat like that. I'm using the corner to get in there. And then as we go somewhere bigger, I can start using that, using the flat side. You know, a lot of times you'll miss that line. Act like you're setting right on the line. You get right up to it, quick. All right, so now we got the black, the green, the pink, and the last color is this yellow. So I'm just gonna fill this in yellow and we're all done. Again, making sure I get kind of all that ink out. When I'm doing this one, when it's pointing towards me, I'm making sure that I'm not stabbing my finger. You're always keeping those needles, you know, in your line of view. Now, when I go into a color that's real light, I'm gonna dip in and I'm gonna wait for a couple seconds because it'll start to mix with whatever's ink is caught up in here. So I wanna see if that ink color changes while it sits. Seems like it's good. It seems I don't see any mixing. So I'm going to go in and fill this yellow in. And you see, this is all getting filled in. There's no blend, so I'm using small circles. Dab, wipe. Okay, I gotta get this little spot right here. So make sure I get that. Again, just make sure, verify. Yeah, I don't see anything mixing in. Now that we're here, I'm going to take some of this petroleum jelly again, wipe it around on everything, try to get all the excess ink up. I'm kind of almost using my nail to kind of scrub a little bit. Let me get all that off. And then now that I'm completely done, I am going to use a little bit of green soap. So I'll put some green soap down, and then I'll wipe everything straight down. And then, of course, dry everything off. And there you have it, guys. All done. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you guys learned a little bit of something. I know it's a super simple tattoo, but these are really the hardest, and your technique shows the most on these. So, you know, when you're doing a neo-traditional design, and really when you're doing any tattoo, I think that worrying about what you're doing in the moment and not moving on until it looks good is really the key. And then at any point, you know, that you're going from your line work to your shading, or from your shading to your color, that you're really looking back and assessing if there's things that you'd like to fix. So yeah, awesome. Thank you guys for watching.